Hello, Bravo bosses, and welcome to the Bravo Investigator podcast with me, your host, Dana. Today on our reality roundup agenda, we are talking about Summer House, VPR slash The Valley, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Teen Mom, The Bachelor, and 90 Day Fiancé. Let's get into it. Happy Monday, everyone. I hope everyone had a good week. Those of you who are watching me on Hurrdat Entertainment's YouTube channel can see that I am like yet in a different spot in my apartment, a different spot on the couch. I'm still just trying to figure out the best spot to do this podcast. I don't really have a lot of room to do it. My whole apartment is 500 square feet, but doing it out in the living room wasn't necessarily the best sound-wise, even though it's the best visually. So in my bedroom, people were complaining that it looked like I was in a storage closet. So I don't know. I'm doing my best. I'm still just trying to figure out what's going to work best and what's going to work technologically best. Right now, I am like on a different corner of my couch because honestly, sometimes I get some anxiety doing this podcast. Even though it's mine and I love it, I still just sometimes, I don't know, I guess get anxiety getting into it. And then once I'm into it, I love it. But because of that, I just want to be as comfortable as possible. And I have to tell you, ever since I started doing this podcast on the couch, it has changed my entire vibe. I feel like this podcast has completely changed ever since I have just become more comfortable doing it. And I mean physically comfortable. I mean, like, not shoved into a corner in my bedroom. Even though I created this amazing space and was so proud of myself for fitting a desk in there, my whole bedroom is like 9 feet by 7 feet or something like that. Pretty small. So I just couldn't even believe it. And, this is just way better. I just feel better. I feel looser. I feel, that I'm just vibing on the couch, vibing on the couch. So here we are. Um, Barry, my new dog, has been pissing me off over the past week. He has continued to shit in the house every time I leave for a minute, so that has sucked. Today he created some other new situation where he was just like peeing for no reason. I don't even know. It's been a little stressful, and he's at that 3 week mark where he's been with me for 3 weeks. So there's the 3-3-3 rule when you rescue a dog, 3 days to decompress, 3 weeks to settle in. I forget what the 3 months is. I guess when they're fully settled in. But the 3 week mark is when their behaviors or like bad behaviors start to come out. So think we may be there. He's a sweet dog otherwise, but we've just been dealing with some stuff over here, and he has tried to escape a number of times now. I've almost lost him 3 times, but you know, we're living, we're vibing over here. And guys, if you didn't get a chance, go back and listen to my Saturday episode where I recap my in real life coffee date with Carl Radke, which I had last Thursday in Toronto. It was such a wild experience. I couldn't believe it actually happened. So definitely go take a back, listen on, or sorry, take a listen back to the Saturday episode where I detail that. I also give you a mini recap of Summer House, the after show, and the Southern Charm reunion part two. All right, so I guess we can get into it because we have a lot of reality TV stories to get into today. And we can start with Summer House because I guess it's short. And I wanted to mention to you guys as well that I hope you're enjoying me doing more types of reality TV shows. So I'm not just doing Bravo anymore. I've branched out to do Teen Mom, Love is Blind, 90 Day Fiancé. What else have I been doing? Teen Mom. I forget. But anything in the reality TV space, I just thought, you know what? Why don't I just do all of it? The Bachelor is another one, like I'm doing that today. And I just thought it would just give more variety and there would be more of an audience base because you may not watch this show, but you may watch this show. So, those of you who have reached out and said that you've been enjoying that, that's great. Thank you so much for reaching out and saying so. And those of you who reached out and gave me really nice comments and reviews this week, thank you as well. I really, really do appreciate that. I know I was being a little bit of a bitch last week complaining about technicalities and stuff. So, I just want to tell you, you guys are so, so sweet. It means so much to me that you've left nice comments and reviews and that you've reached out and just told me how much you're enjoying the show. That means so much to me. And if you ever do have constructive feedback, though, please let me know. Send me a DM on Instagram at the Bravo Investigator. I would love to chat it out because I just want to make sure that the show is best for you guys. That being said, I hope you know that just because I've been doing these other shows doesn't mean that I'm not focusing on Bravo. I just feel like there hasn't been a ton of Bravo news, or there hasn't been enough news that I felt was like chat worthy enough, right? Because there's the off thing where like someone had a baby and it's like, okay, how long can we talk about that for? So I don't really want to delve into stories like that. And plus, sometimes when I do the mini recaps on the weekends, I will add in a bit of news to that. So, for example, when I did the Summer House after show, was it the after show? Or just, when I was recapping the episode on Saturday, I gave Lindsay Hubbard's update about what the real deal is with Bailey Henderson and why she really got fired. So, again, go back and listen to the Saturday episode if you want to hear about that. So sometimes I'll tie in the news that ties into those shows if I'm doing a mini recap, but for the most part, I don't. I separate it out for Reality Mondays, Reality Roundup. And so we'll just get into it with Summer House. But like I said, there just isn't as much in the Bravo sphere just within the last couple of weeks, which is why I was focusing more on other shows like Teen Mom and stuff. But with Summer House, we have Paige ignoring Madison. So apparently, Madison said on Watch What Happens Live that Paige never reached back out when Madison reached out to her when they broke up, when Paige and Craig broke up. So Madison did reach out to say, I hope you're doing okay. Paige never said anything in return. And then apparently Paige didn't congratulate Madison when she found out that she was pregnant and she made her pregnancy announcement. So I thought this was interesting in the sense that how do you notice that? I just find it odd when you're going through either like a really terrible time or a really good time that you would notice who has reached out to you and who hasn't. And like obviously that those are the times when you find out who your real friends are, but like I mean, Paige was never her real friend. And it just sort of reminds me of Teddi Mellencamp and her cancer battle because she has called out everyone who has not, said something to her in her cancer battle. And I said the same thing then. I just thought, how would you notice or how would you have the time or energy to notice? I mean, Andy was asking her a question on Watch What Happens Live, but I think he was just asking Madison, what is your status with Paige? I don't really think they ever had a real close relationship. I mean, out of everyone on Southern Charm, I feel like Paige bonded with Madison the most because, they were both fashionistas and they were both around the same age. And Madison had a close relationship with Craig. But other than that, I don't think the two of them ever hung out by themselves or on the outside. So, given that, I think, if Paige doesn't reach out to congratulate you on your pregnancy, that's probably normal. But at the same time, to call it out is just interesting as well, or to even notice. And I just wanted to mention, even though it was in the Saturday episode, I just want to confirm that the girl that Craig is dating, Natalie Buffet or Buffett, is not the same Natalie that he was dating before. So he was dating a Natalie in like 2020 or 2021. She was actually living with Shep and Taylor for a bit, or was it like Austin and Taylor? Because they all had COVID. This is the girl that he was dating when he was on Summer House, and then he broke up with her because she hung out with Madison, which is so funny because look at him now. He's like so close with Madison now. And then he ended up breaking up with her and starting to date Paige. So different Natalie. This Natalie, and I went over this in the Saturday episode, he dated previously. So this isn't his ex Natalie, but this is another ex Natalie that he's had. And apparently they dated briefly in 2019. They went to the Bahamas together. They got in some sort of fight, and she allegedly, according to Dumois, took off and hung out with other friends who were in the Bahamas. So I guess that's why this whole thing was able to happen so quickly, because this is someone from his past. And Paige will be on Watch What Happens Live for the finale episode. So she just did an Amazon Live yesterday, and she confirmed that because a lot of people were actually noticing that. I was like, wait a minute, why has Paige not been on Watch What Happens Live this season? That is kind of crazy. Like, and then I was thinking, has she ever? And someone confirmed to me that she has, but they're going to have her on for the finale, which makes sense because they have that pickup scene. But it just seems so far out at this point. Like, if you think about it, according to Paige, Craig and Paige broke up on the phone on December 2nd. We're in like April. It was like 4 months ago at this point. Like, by the time we get to the finale and everything, it's going to be so far gone. And I'm not saying that we should bore of it or like tired to talk about it, but it is sort of crazy if you think about it in real time. If you think about the fact that Craig has moved on, it's been 4 months. That's nuts. Has it really been 4 months? It's been 4 months. Wow. Anyways, so Paige was on the cover of the New York Times, or sorry, not the cover. Paige was in the New York Times. They did an article about her, and she did discuss Craig a little bit. So I'm going to mention what she said here. No one did anything, she said. It wasn't a bad thing. I think we both were just being really mature and saying what we want and what we didn't want. And I think that's extremely powerful to be able to voice how you're feeling in real time and what you want for your future. The breakup of one of the network's most beloved couples generate plenty of online commentary and speculation, especially as it happened just ahead of the premieres of the new season of Summer House and Mr. Conover's show Southern Charm, which follows the lives of young people working in Charleston, Southern Carolina. Every on camera interaction between the two suddenly became fodder for dissection. On one episode of Southern Charm, Miss DeSorbo and Mr. Conover, who had not yet broken up, discussed her increasingly busy schedule and how that conflicts with his desire to have her move to Charleston and start a family. I'm proud of myself for making a tough decision, even though the public was like, "You're wrong, you'll never find another person again," Miss DeSorbo said. She says she has been heartened by the reaction of many of her female fans who have written to her expressing how grateful they are to see a woman on TV willing to stand strong in what she wants. I am really thankful for the women who supported me and saw what I was going through, she said. So it's just interesting that she seems to be changing her tune now. Now she's like, no one did anything wrong. It's people wanting different things. And it was. It's just that for the past few months, it's really turned into this very negative thing where she's constantly making negative commentary towards him. And I think that she has finally realized that that is just really not working for her. And if you're thinking of timing, I mean, she made that comment after Craig was on Watch What Happens Live. She posted like a meme that was like, if I'm mean, it's because you make me mean. I would then maybe even assume that this New York Times article was written after that. It's possible. These things have a very short turnaround, so it's very possible that this was written after that and that her publicist was like, listen, you got to rein it in with being mean to Craig thing. I think that's just not working for you publicly or optically. So I think you just need to be more neutral about it. And that's what I think this article is. I don't think she's necessarily changing her tune. I think this is just what is better for her optically. But I'm curious to see what'll happen on Watch What Happens Live because Andy's going to ask her very pointed questions. But again, we're going to be so far gone at that point. Is it going to be like 6 months out? So at that point, how much anger will she still have? And I hope not much because it's just going to have been such a long time. I don't know. And I just don't know if we're going to be as fascinated to watch it at that point in time as we were like when Ariana did Watch What Happens Live after Sandoval, right? It's like a whole different thing. Okay, let's move on to Vanderpump Rules slash The Valley. And we have just a lot of little pieces of news from here today. So just not a lot of big chunks of things, just a lot of little things. We had Lisa Vanderpump, who did Bravo's Hot Mic podcast, which is Bravo's podcast with Alex Baskin, executive producer of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Vanderpump Rules, The Valley, etc. And, Lisa Vanderpump was not like this big star to me in terms of Beverly Hills. This episode of Bravo's Hot Mic got a lot of positive public reaction. I was just sort of surprised. A lot of people were like, bring her back. We miss Lisa. Lisa was right. Just a lot of that stuff. So I thought that that was interesting, just as like an overall feel. But in terms of Vanderpump Rules and adjacent, she was asked who she still has a good relationship with, and she says Schwartz, Lala, and Stassi. And if you think about it, those are people who have a different relationship with her, where Schwartz, he can never really be mad at anybody. Stassi has a current relationship with her because of Vanderpump Villa, so I think that sort of makes sense. And then when she was asked about James, this I didn't love and I didn't expect to love it, but she said, well, I hate it. If the press are going to, report a story or ask me to stop and talk about something, like a snippet of it, because it's, I don't want to be that person that's blaming, the reports or the editing of. But when you say something in context, what did I say? I was very disappointed with James, because I've had these conversations with him that drinking, working, or being a decent person for him are mutually exclusive. They do not go together. And he should be held accountable for that because he knows that very well. He's a little asshole when he drinks. He's aggressive. He is just volatile. So the most important thing in this whole equation, I want to talk to Allie. So I spoke to Allie at length and I said, what happened? And she said categorically, no, he didn't hurt me. I said, you sure? You promise me? Allie, I really need to know this from you. Did he hurt you? Absolutely not. For me, was very terse with him, disappointed in him because I had been an advocate for him and his success, and for him to go down that path. And he has so much to lose. Allie loved him. She's a great girl, and I think, with their relationship, now they've gone to take time apart because I don't blame her. You've got to prove to me that you've got to be the man that I want. And I think he let them both down. So I think she thinks that the public is upset because of a snippet of something that she said and it wasn't the full context. And no, it wasn't that because I don't care how hard she's come down on him. It's still not enough. She's always defending him, and that's why people were mad at her. I personally was mad at her for the way that she phrased that. It wasn't that she said he didn't categorically hurt her. The way she described it in that article was that she had spoken to Allie and that Allie had gotten in a fight with James. The police were called somehow. And then because she was mad at him, she was like, whatever, take him away, which implied that Allie was lying or just wanted the police to take him away because they got in a fight. It just, the way that whole thing was implied was very weird to me. I just thought of something just now, like literally just right now. Okay, if you are a victim of domestic violence, and I'm not saying that Allie is, but if you are, do you think you're going to be honest with Lisa Vanderpump, someone that you have zero relationship with? Just saying. Let me just put this out there for a second. So, Lisa Vanderpump comes to you, who you've met a handful of times, who you don't have an actual relationship with, and you may not have told anyone in your life that your boyfriend is abusive to you in whatever way. And this person comes to you who you barely know and says, listen, did he hurt you? Did he physically hurt you? Are you necessarily going to be honest with that person of all people in the world? Above your mother, above your sister, above whoever? No. So I just want to put that out there for a second, that just because Allie said that to Lisa doesn't make it true. And it doesn't even mean that that's what Allie said to Lisa, because Lisa shouldn't be speaking for Allie regardless. But anyways. And then she was talking about who has reached out to her and who hasn't in terms of the reboot of Vanderpump Rules. And she says that, of course, Schwartz has, and she thinks Ariana has, but Katie hasn't, and that's expected. Why would Katie need to reach out to you about like the end of Vanderpump Rules? Like that was her job. That was her thing. I think Lisa should be reaching out to Katie and all the cast members and saying, "Hey, it's been this great, amazing run. I'm so sorry it ended. I love you all." I don't know why Katie would need to reach out to Lisa. Oh, of course, because Lisa did this for everyone, right? Lisa's the one who gave everyone this opportunity. So when you lose your job, you need to reach out to Lisa and thank her. That's right. That's right. That makes sense. So again, guys, I just don't think Lisa is this amazing, entity that everyone else seems to think she is, because I just don't really think that she cares about anyone. So Tom Sandoval and his girlfriend Victoria were on the Viall files. And you know what? It wasn't awful. It wasn't anything like last time. He showed up on time. He wasn't on drugs. And you know what? I'm not saying I like him. This has nothing to do with that. It was just nice, though, to sort of feel like a lighter air about him. He seems really happy. Their relationship has always been tumultuous from what we have seen online. I mean, do you guys remember that insane live he did at like 4 a.m. where like Victoria had broken up with him, where she was like, where she made that story where she was like, everyone was right, he's in love with the man's or something, or the woman's or something like that. And then he tried to explain it in a 4 a.m. live, but he trailed off and he never actually got to it. So say what you will about their relationship, but based on this episode, they seem okay. I mean, listen, I don't think they're gonna make it, but here's what I want to say about this episode. He seemed lighter, he seemed happier, and that just, I don't know, that brought me a sense of joy like it does when I see Raquel out in the world doing her yoga and meditation with her new boyfriend in Arizona, not in the spotlight, not in Hollywood, and not a care in the world. And to me, that is just such a sign of like, you've moved on and you're okay. And she almost seems like she couldn't be happier. And in this episode, listening to Sandoval, it was almost like, oh wow, like he sounds like he couldn't be happier. And I think that maybe the end of this show was the best thing for everybody. That being said, he was asked by Nick Viall about his opinion about James Kennedy, so I am going to play that for you guys now.
Considering James and I's past, yeah, he was getting chants going like Sandoval's a liar, and but unlike James Kennedy, I'm not going to kick him while he's down. I'm sure he's dealing with a lot, but with that being said, whether there's alcohol involved or not, there's absolutely no excuse for a man to put his hands on a woman. And also, there are a lot of previous other allegations, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's all I want to really say about that.
Can I ask you what?
Now, when I posted this clip, I was surprised by the public reaction. The public reaction was more so, shut up, Sandoval, and you were the one supporting James the whole time, anyways, and now you're saying this. And listen, I understand that and I get that, but I feel like when someone finally just comes out of the woodwork and supports you when it has to do with abuse, can we just believe it? Can we just be okay with it then? You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying we have to be okay with Sandoval. I'm not saying we have to love Sandoval. But when someone says something about abuse, can we just believe it? Can we just believe people when they say something about abuse? Can that be a thing? That's all I want to say. Like, I just don't feel it's fair to trivialize what someone says because we don't like them. We did the same thing with Raquel, where like she puts in those legal documents that James kicked her dog 4 times, and everybody's like, "Shut up, liar!" And it's like, no, no, no. Just because she lied about one thing doesn't mean she's lied about everything in her life ever. So just because we don't like Sandoval doesn't mean we shouldn't take what he is saying seriously. I think I also agree where there is smoke, there's fire when it comes to James. This is something I've been talking about for a really long time. Go back to listen to any of my James episodes, my breaking news one when he got arrested. I mean, I have many episodes where I've delved into many of the allegations against him. And yes, does Tom know about those? I'm sure that he does. And I don't want to defend anyone for not saying anything at the time because I did not defend Sheena, right? I sort of came at her a couple weeks ago about it. But I just want to say that if somebody says where there's smoke, there's fire, can we just believe that? Can we just believe that as opposed to being like, well, because it's Sandoval, we're not going to believe it? I just feel like it's so hard for anyone to talk about abuse at all. So if anyone is willing to, can we just believe them, please? That's all I ask. Okay. So Lally Lewber just got a new podcast and it's called Starstruck. And the idea of the podcast is that she is going to not interview, sorry. She is going to have celebrities on her podcast and she's going to be reading their birth charts. So when I heard about this, I thought, why? Why would I want to watch someone basically give somebody else their horoscope? I don't really get it. But there was this clip that came out of her most recent episode or her first episode where she talked a little bit about herself and her relationship with James. So I'm just going to play that for you guys.
Two serious boyfriends have had alcohol issues. And it made me, after this past relationship, I'm like going through a breakup right now. And I'm like sitting with myself and I'm like, okay, why am I attracting the same partner? And I was talking to my therapist. My dad, by the way, died when I was 11 from alcohol related things. And I would never have connected this, but she was like, you're trying to save your dad. Yeah. So like that just did something to me. And I was like, holy shit, I haven't drank since the breakup because I was like, I need to process things in a healthy way. And like, how is that? Like, that's my projection or something. I don't know. So it's called.
What I thought was interesting about this, two things. One is it sort of reminds me of Raquel in the sense that Raquel also had the type of personality where she was trying to save someone. She was always trying to save people, and she gave people a lot of chances and she had a lot of patience. So it's just interesting that James ended up with two women who had sort of like, I don't want to call it a savior complex because that's not what it is, but had a mission to sort of fix or save the person that they're trying to date. I just thought that was interesting. Yeah. I wonder if that's something that he looks for in a woman. He looks for someone who's trying to save him. But something else about this podcast, I just think it's interesting how much press it's getting and how much money is being put into it. So, the podcast network that she's on, which I think is called Open Mind, it has Khloe Kardashian's podcast on it, okay? And if you've seen any of the videos of Ali Luber's podcast, space, like the entire setup, the podcast, what do you call it? Like her podcast studio, it is glamorous. It looks extremely expensive. And then if you go to basically like any Bravo podcast, there is like automatically like a bonus episode that pops up with a like 6-minute ad of Starstruck featuring Ali Luber. So it's like popping up in people's feeds to force them to look at it, to show them that it's there. It's just getting a ton of press, a ton of money, and I wonder why. She was not even a cast member on Vanderpump Rules, while Raquel was, right? Like, I want to talk about the difference here because Raquel was on the show for 5 years and she was a full-time cast member for two. Allie was like a friend of for 2 seasons, and I'm just not sure how she got all the way here. I mean, good for her. It just seems odd. It seems odd that we're putting all this money into this person that just sort of popped up out of nowhere. And there have always been rumors out there that she started dating him just to be famous. And it's very interesting that not long after the show ended, they broke up, and it sounds like for very valid reasons. But at the same time, I just wonder her motives in the first place because she did sort of come out of nowhere. And then as soon as they break up, she has maintained her relationships with, Olivia Flowers and Sheena and all of these people. And it seems like I would think she would have gone back to her old life, whatever that was. But, she's being thrust into stardom. Or, yeah, I mean, at the same time, if somebody's giving you an opportunity, you're not going to turn it down. So I'm sure she's been handed all of these opportunities, and that's amazing. It just seems odd to me that we're going to put all of this money into this girl that we barely knew before. And maybe people are really interested in this particular topic, like birth charts. I know that when she has her business that she sells out, and she's able to charge quite a bit per hour. I just find it odd that we're putting all of this money, or someone is putting all of this money into this basic unknown. But good for her, and I hope the podcast does well. It seems to be doing well so far. Whose podcast I will never listen to is Michelle Lally's podcast, which is called The Pursuit of Sassiness, I think, and I can't do that. I do like Michelle, but I'm not going to listen to her podcast. But there was some news that did come out of this past week where I don't know if you guys remember on season 1 of The Valley, the guys were in the pool and they were talking about how Michelle like meets really famous clients, and one of the guys had mentioned it. I think it was Jason. They had actually like named someone that Michelle has like been hanging out with, and then it was like blurred out and everyone tried to figure it out. So Michelle confirmed that that person, that director was Quentin Tarantino, which I do believe people were able to figure out, which is crazy. I love the sleuths. I love that people are able to like figure out what somebody is saying or like zoom in on something from really far away and determine that it's Paige DeSorbo. I'm just like, I just think that's pretty wild what people are able to figure out. So, uh, but she says no, she didn't sleep with him. And Jesse even backs that up and confirms that. I just think it's funny that, you know what, I honestly don't think that Michelle cheated on Jesse in any sense. I mean, we'll see how that plays out in season 2 of The Valley, which premieres, oh my gosh, in like a week. Um, but I really don't think that she did, especially with clients. I don't think that that's a thing. I think that she's a professional businesswoman. You're not going to get anywhere in the business world if you're sleeping your way to the top in 2025. So I really don't believe that Michelle is sleeping with her real estate clients to get anywhere or, to get real estate. I really don't think that that's happening. If she is cheating on Jesse, or if she did cheat on Jesse, I would not think it would be with like a real estate client. It just doesn't make sense. And then Sheena Shay was on Two Teas in a Pod, the twat seat. And I just thought it was interesting that they had her on right now. Like, yes, The Valley is coming back in a week, but technically that is not Sheena's show. She is a friend of. But one of the reasons I wanted to mention this episode, and not because there was anything really fulsome in this podcast episode, but one of the reasons I wanted to mention it is because one, she said that Lisa only reaches out to her when she wants something. So it is interesting how Sheena is sort of really changing her tune when it comes to Lisa Vanderpump because she used to really obviously kiss Lisa's ass and now doesn't seem to be appearing to do so, which again is interesting given that she is a producer of The Valley. That being said, this episode of Two Teas in a Pod really seemed to focus on trying to create the vibe that Sheena should be full-time on the Valley. That was what I got from it. We've had those conversations for like a year now. Is Sheena going to the Valley? Is she buying a house in the Valley so she can be on the Valley? Whatever. We knew she was a friend of, but there seems to be a push, and maybe it's because her show is over to get her full time. And this is only something I've started to notice again within the past couple of weeks. And I think, like I said, because her show is over. So maybe when she was on Two Teas in a Pod, there was conversations amongst PR to really push the questions towards what would it look like for Sheena to be full time? Because that's really what it was in this episode. It was really like, would you want that? And does that make sense for you? And blah, blah, blah. And then there was all these promos in the past week that Sheena has been a part of, like online social media promos, where it's like season 2 of The Valley's coming soon. And then on her episode of Shenanigans last week, she was talking about either getting her hair done or something like that because the premiere of season 2 of The Valley is coming out. So I think her next mission in life is to try to get herself, not on Dancing with the Stars, but permanent on the Valley, I guess for season 3, which, you know, I don't really care either way, but it just has always been with Sheena. it's always been very obvious what she's trying to do. So I just sort of hate that. I just wish she had a little bit more subtlety to her. But I'm telling you guys, there is definitely going to be a push from her, her team, anyone around her to make it seem like she is a full-time cast member on this show. That is just what I'm feeling from this. Okay, and then our last piece of news from Vanderpump Rules the Valley is that we got news that Britney's bar, Brits, isn't going to be opening. So that was really upsetting. So this article came out that I'm going to read for you guys, and then Britney has actually spoken on it. So I'll give you guys that too. So the article is called Bar None. The Valley star Brittany Cartwright's bar, Brits WeHo, canceled and not opening months after her exciting announcement. The current managers state that Britney's deal was terminated before they were involved with the business. A separate source explained Brits WeHo never part of the deal with a new team taking over, and they don't have any plans to open in the future. The deal was terminated before they were involved at all. It wasn't their call and had nothing to do with Britney. Unfortunately, she just got caught in the crosshairs of a business decision. Um, so we were like, wait, what happened here? Like, new owners are taking over, so what's going on? So Brittany actually talked about this on her episode of When Reality Hits the other day, so I'm just gonna play that for you and then we can chat about it.
Can you please give us an update on when Brits will be open? Okay, so this is something I wanted to talk about before, it got out there. I think that it needs to come from me. They sold Rocco's, which was what Brits was connected to, and it's all part of the same thing. The partners straight up sold it, didn't tell me that they were going to sell it, didn't communicate with me whatsoever. We had already, completely decorated everything, like ordered everything, the wallpaper, the new like stuff. We were going to put in new seatings. We ordered new chandeliers. We ordered everything on January 7th. So I thought that it was happening up until like this week. They told me that it got sold. And, I am pretty upset about it because I wasn't a part of the conversation. I know that it's their decision. They're the owners. I would have just liked to have known so that I wasn't just like, I found out because Zach started texting me being like, hey, it says that Rocco's is being sold. Like Zach is the reason that I found out that it was even being sold. I understand that the fires happened and that was so terrible. And I think that they took a hit with that. So I understand, it's their decision, whatever they want to do. I was honored to be, asked to do it anyway. And I was so excited about it. So I think that that's why I'm disappointed. And plus I had talked about it so much and I was so excited. I mean, it was happening. And then now that it got sold and I didn't even know it was being sold, I feel like it made me look like a liar. And that's not the case whatsoever. So I am pretty upset about it. They have offered me to do a couple other things, but I'm not sure that I want to. They were saying something about me taking over a couple nights at Jax's and maybe changing the name. I mean, there was just different things that they were offering, and I'm just not interested in going into business with him.
So the interesting part about this is when she said that Rocco's is being sold because Jax's bar is part of Rocco's. So if Jax's bar is part of Rocco's, how is Jax's not being sold? Or is it being sold? I just don't understand why that affected Britney's business but not Jax's business. That is really confusing. I don't think we've heard from Jax on this to date. It just doesn't really make sense that Brittany wouldn't be able to do her bar with Rocco's if they are selling Rocco's because Rocco's is where Jax's is. So I guess we'll hear more about that soon. But, I'm not too worried for Brittany. She'll open something else, she'll do something else. She'll do a million other amazing things, but it would have been really cool to have a bar that was like just Brittany's, I feel like. Okay, let's move on to the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So, Teddi Mellencamp did a cover story with Us Weekly about her health journey and everything that's going on with her cancer battle. So, I'm going to read you guys that story now. So, it says during her 3 seasons on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, we saw Teddi Mellencamp in her fair share of arguments and confrontations. But nothing could prepare her for the monumental battle she's facing now. I'm fighting for my life, she tells Us Weekly, but also for my family's life and all the people I love. In February, 5 years after leaving the reality show, the daughter of beloved singer-songwriter John Mellencamp revealed a devastating diagnosis. Dealing with melanoma on and off since 2022, the Bravo alum 43 got the news that she had stage 4 melanoma and it metastasized to her lung and brain. Just 3 months earlier, the successful podcaster and lifestyle and fitness company owner had announced her separation from her husband of 13 years, Edwin, 47. Putting their differences and legal proceedings aside, he immediately stepped up to support her as she undergoes taxing medical treatment while still caring for her young family. Housewives viewers will remember Mellencamp's catchphrase on the show whenever her kids were upset that she had to leave them for work or a night out, and now especially poignant, moms always come back. Now Mellencamp admits, I have not said that line to them since I've been back from the hospital. They all know that I'm fighting the hardest I possibly can, but I haven't said it because I don't want to lie to them, and I don't know. Facing the most profound challenge imaginable with grace and a little dark humor, Mellencamp still describes herself as lucky. Meeting us on the morning of March 24th at the One Hotel in West Hollywood, the star sported gray aloe sweatpants and a white tank and tuned into a true crime podcast as she prepared for the cover shoot, complete with her new pixie cut. Ugh, I'm so over it already, she quipped after a compliment on her hair. But Cruz made it a little better because he said, Mom, we can all get the same haircuts. Throughout the day, Mellencamp was in great spirits, cracking jokes, yes, even about divorce and cancer, and talking all things housewives. While she mentioned her energy levels were declining due to treatment, the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills alum has been undergoing radiation and immunotherapy. She stayed upbeat and seemed to be making the most of a daunting situation. Sadly, just 2 days later, she received the heartbreaking news on March 26 that 4 additional small tumors had been found on her brain during an emergency MRI. But if one thing is clear from our convo with Mellencamp, she's giving this everything she's got. Here, the podcaster goes deep about how she's coping, where she stands with a strange husband, a RHOBH, and about the housewives who have and haven't been there for her. So they asked the question, how are you feeling today? And she said, I'm listening to my body, but also staying active and doing things that I love that I love because when I do too much laying around, I get pretty sad. On the days I'm feeling low, I can get really emotional and I'm open to the people in my life. Then I have an easier time resting. When I try to pretend I'm okay and resting, it's hard for me. Then the question is, take us back on your medical journey. What were the symptoms that made you seek medical help earlier this year? And she said, I was having migraines and taking medication didn't help. I was shaking and feeling crazy. Then one day I was like, something is really wrong. I couldn't see. Edwin took me to the emergency room in Tarzana. The pain had become something I'd never felt before. They diagnosed me with multiple brain tumors, but the ER doctor said he can't take them out. They've got to get me into Cedars-Sinai Hospital. And I'm like, you can't get me in tonight? I want to go tonight. I had 6 brain tumors and 2 lung tumors, and they all came from melanoma that metastasized into these tumors inside of my body. What happened next? They asked. We called Carl Richards, and they're like, how do we get into Cedars? And she called around and found a way for us to get in. Kyle saved the day. I believe it was within 24 hours that an incredible surgeon was able to remove 4 brain tumors from my brain. I didn't know they'd been there for 6 months to a year. We had no idea. And then they say, you started radiation and immunotherapy that must take a huge toll on your body. And Teddi said, I thought I was going to feel like how it felt after my neck lift. She laughs. My reaction is always a headache, but I found out that's good news because it means that immunotherapy or radiation is killing your cancer. And then they ask, what's the next course of treatment? And then she said, I find out for sure exactly where we stand on June 1st. If you need to do another round, if there's any other surgery, if it's the end, it's a hard pill to swallow. And then they say it's got to be extremely difficult to think about the end. And then Teddi says, well, a little PSA, get life insurance early and do your will. Doing all those things once you're already been diagnosed with cancer isn't a dream. That's really hard. Hopefully you never get sick, but do it before you get sick. I ask, is this the most challenging battle you've been through? And she said, this is definitely the hardest thing I faced in my life. But now it feels less hard. When I was in the ICU, it was incredibly difficult because I had no memory. One day I realized it was my daughter's birthday and I couldn't be there for it. It was really sad. It's still sad when I can't be there for my kids the way I'd normally be. And then they asked, what do you remember about being in the hospital? And she said, my dad came, all of my siblings, friends from all over the country. Edwin was on a mission to make sure every single person I love and care about came to visit me. I don't remember one person. I remember things that annoyed me, like they put the drain in my brain, and then she laughs. It's amazing that you can laugh about it, they say. And then she says, well, I'm so lucky. Even though I was kind of annoyed, so many people were there. I'm happy now because of the memories they've shared. They say sometimes you seem like you were totally with it, and sometimes you were a hot mess express. One day you were certain that Heath Ledger was stalking you at night, she laughs. And I was like, he'll be here tonight. Stay late. And then they ask, how did you feel when they shaved your head? And she said, I don't think I cared that much. Something that hit me really hard was the first time I went to work out. I'm sitting there bald, my entire body looked completely different because of the steroids. I tried to run and I couldn't. That's pretty devastating to me. I was at Barry's boot camp crying. The poor instructor is looking at me like, you good? And then they ask, has your perspective on how you look changed? And she says it depends. There are some days where I think you're allowed to say, I don't feel confident right now. I feel very uncomfortable and I want to wear a wig. And there are some days that I'm like, it is what it is. Some days I'm really sad and really scared, and some days I'm like, I've got this. I'm not worried. Facing your mortality must be really hard, the author says. And then Teddi says, everybody wants me to be super positive all the time. One of my coping mechanisms is being sarcastic. I'd rather joke about it and have the best possible outcome than be completely in denial and have my heart broken. And then they ask, how do you try to stay positive? And she said, planning things I look forward to doing. A lot of people, not doctors, strangers on the internet, said I shouldn't be writing, but it's one of the things I love doing with my daughter. And I'm really lucky that Edwin, who I was in the middle of a divorce from, we put everything on hold. It wasn't really the timing to be fighting over emails. He's been extremely kind and helpful with the kids. That's made things a lot easier. And then they ask, are you living under the same roof? And she said, yes, I'm in the primary and he's in one of the guest rooms. It's fun. It's all the things that I loved about our marriage, but without all of the problems. And then they say, it sounds like you and Edwin are in a good place. And Teddi says, I'm so glad because it was so bad for a while. I was like, how did this happen to me and my best friend of 16 years? We've always made each other laugh. We always pushed each other's buttons, and that made it fun. And us not being able to have that for a long time was really sad and hard. If any part of this was for a reason, the second that I got sick, he completely changed. It's a silver lining. He's been there for me 100%, he's been there for the kids, and we're back to laughing. We call it the Divorce Chronicles. And I want to talk to him about the kinds of girls he's going to marry because if these people are going to be taking care of my kids, this is what I want, and this is the definition of what I don't want. And then he said, or the question is, does he get to pick your next partner for you as well? And Teddi says, sure, but I'm not going to listen. And then they ask, can you tell us what led to the separation in the first place? And Teddi says, I think we didn't communicate exactly what we needed. When that happens over time, you start to lose what you were happiest with. And then they ask, how are you managing your kids' well being? And she says, I'm paying for therapy, laughs. I'm not equipped to fully handle this. It is helping because they ask me questions that I probably wouldn't have thought to give them answers to. And then they ask the question, do they realize the full extent of your health battle? And Teddi says they realize when I'm in pain and how massive the surgery was. I don't know that they know the rest. I think they're a bit scared, and I'm going to fight really hard. I can't imagine my life without them, so I'm going to do everything I possibly can, no matter how mean it makes me. And then she laughs. I can't imagine. Do I sound like a narcissist? I can't imagine any of them living without me. And then they ask, how did you tell your dad you were ill? And Teddi says, it happened between Edwin and my dad, not me. I was not expecting my entire family to be out there within 24 hours, but by the time I was out of surgery, everybody was there. My dad hates LA, so the fact that he was here for 18 days, wow, that says a lot. And let me see if there's any other really imperative questions. Oh, they're like, have you been dating again? How are you meeting guys? And she says on Hinge, excuse me, Raya, why am I still on the wait list? I have 5 referrals. I can't believe you have to get referrals. That's crazy. I realize that maybe am slightly controversial, but I'd appreciate you letting me in because have seen some of the other people on there and they seem like even bigger train wrecks than me. And then they ask, so tell us about the Hinge dates. And she says, there's only been 2 guys I've actually gone on dates with. The first one asked me if I wanted to have more kids, and I was like, I'm in the hospital. This isn't really the best time, bud. I have a head wrap on, and I just learned my own birth date. But the other guy is super nice, super sweet, exactly what I need right now. Okay, I'm just gonna end it there because there's like a lot of questions. But okay, let me just talk about, okay. First of all, I love that she is being super open and honest about her health battle. I love her levity about it. I think it's a beautiful thing. I don't think everyone can have it when you're going through like literally the most traumatic thing in your life, but I'm just so impressed that she is. I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, that's definitely not how I would operate. I know that I am like the most anxious person alive, and I know that that would take over me. And so maybe her ability to be light and to laugh and to make jokes has helped her get through this. I mean, whatever you got to do to get through this. Also, I am just obsessed with Edwin right now. Actually, this just came to me. I almost feel like he should be like husband of the year or like two judgy girls should be winning like the hottest guy on Bravo. He's not the hottest, but it's just to put aside the fact that your wife cheated on you and just be there for her and be there for your kids and just make sure that everyone is good and settled and taken care of, that's a good man. Like, what else can you say about that, right? Like, you know, he could really hate her right now. He doesn't have to do this. And the fact that he's doing this is beautiful. To the fact that she's dating, I do find that a bit odd because, she doesn't have a good prognosis from what I've understood and heard. Unless you're just sort of dating for fun because you sort of just want to keep yourself busy, that's one thing. I don't know how she would be needing to keep herself busy because, like she said, she was in the hospital. But why is she talking to people when she's in the hospital? Like, that's so strange to me. Like, a guy is saying, like, oh, do you want to go out? And she's like, dude, I'm in the hospital. But you're the one on the app, right? Like, it's just, there's a desperation to it in my mind to, like, be on a dating app when you're in the hospital. It just shows like how badly you want to go on a date. And again, unless she's just doing it for fun, to be funny and just to have someone to chat with because it's kind of hilarious at this time in her life. But other than that, I just found it to be a little bit odd to be not dying, not that part, but to be in a hospital bed and, talking to people about going on online dates. It's just a little odd to me. Anyways, that's just my perspective. Okay. I just want to go back to Lisa Vanderpump being on Bravo's Hot Mic podcast because she did say something about Kyle here. So I just want to play this clip and then we can discuss it.
Thought, and also I suddenly thought, I don't want this to be ambiguous. That's it. When Kyle was in my kitchen, I thought, that's it. To me, if somebody knows you, like I know you, if you said to me, Lisa, I swear to you, on my parents' life, that's it. It'd be done. I'll be okay. I believe you. What do we do from here? So when you say to somebody, I swear to you, on my children's life, that should be enough. And when Kyle looked at me and said, I don't believe you, I was like, all right, we're done. Get the fuck out of my house. That's it. Don't call me a liar.
So you recently left the door open for reconciliation by saying if she were to apologize for you, maybe there might be...
Apologize for me or apologize
I'm sorry,
to me?
if she were to apologize to you, that there might be some path forward. And she was on this podcast recently, and her message to you was, don't hold your breath.
Oh, gosh. Listen, it would be nice for her just to tell the truth, right? But Kyle's not, as we've seen, as the show's transpired, not always been that truthful about her own life and her own feelings. So maybe if she kind of came from an honest place and thought, you know what, maybe I did get it wrong. Because why would she want to reignite her friendship with me if she thought I was a liar? Well, why would you? I wouldn't want to if I truly believe that. So she kind of comes up to me, sometimes, like if I cross paths with her, and they say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. I'm indifferent with her. That's it. I'm not really, yeah.
So you don't miss her at all?
I miss what we had, but not the path it went down. I think if anybody's kind of really aggressive with you and they call you a liar, no, you don't. I don't need that person in my life at all. But I miss what we had because I think we had this unique friendship, and that's what I enjoyed. I loved the kind of late night phone calls and how we would giggle and laugh together, and how I was always there for her because she had a very tumultuous relationship with her sisters, as we've seen. So I was always a sounding board for her, an advocate of them, kind of always trying to keep that relationship on solid ground, family. But our antics, Kyle and I could laugh together, climbing over walls, breaking people's hotel rooms, the other cast members, and getting stuck in the wall, my butt getting stuck in the wall, or pushing her down the hall on the...
So, a few things about this. One, she says that why would Kyle want to be friends with a liar? Well, I don't think that Kyle necessarily wants to be friends with a liar, but I think that there's certain characteristics that people have that we just sort of excuse. I talked about this with Ryan Bailey on his podcast, So Bad It's Good with Ryan Bailey, where we talked about how there's just certain people in life where they have certain behaviors that you excuse. You have that friend in life that is perpetually late. You have that friend in life that you can just not rely on. And so maybe for Kyle, part of it was the show. Like she obviously had to think like, okay, I have to say I want to befriend her again and reconcile with her because we are cast members on a show. But I think part of it is exactly what Lisa said. They enjoyed this banter that they had together. They had a good time together. So for Kyle, she was able to excuse the fact that Lisa was kind of a liar and would do shit like going to Radar Online because she was able to see other good in Lisa that she found more valuable and she was able to put the other stuff aside. Now, the fact that she is insisting to this day that she still didn't do that and that Kyle should have believed her because she said that she swore on her kids' lives and that should have been good enough is baffling. Swearing on your kids' lives is such a housewives trope, okay? We have had every housewife swear on their children's lives. Go back and watch the last season of The Housewives of New Jersey. You've got Dolores swearing on her kids' lives. The last season of I don't even know what. I swear to God, I swear to God that every housewife is constantly swearing on their kids' lives. Heather Dubrow last season swore on her kids' lives. Housewives love swearing on their kids' lives. So just because you swear on your kids' lives doesn't make it true. It should. It should, but it doesn't. So for her to say that just because I swore on my kids makes it scientific fact, it shouldn't. I mean, it just doesn't. And obviously Kyle was doing what she felt was morally best for her, which was believing what she believed. And the fact that this many years later, Lisa is still, hammering down what she believes that she had no involvement with Radar Online, anything to do with Lucy Apple Juicy, and any of the stuff that happened in the media involving Dorit. She swears up and down that still isn't true. And I just think that that's like, wow. But I expect that of Lisa. I expect if Lisa is going to lie about something, she is going to go the long game. Like, Ken is going to take that to his grave. He is. And you go back and you watch that season. I forget what season it is, like 7 or 8, the whole Lucy Apple Juicy season. And like the scene that Lisa has where she sits down with like the lie detector guy. I mean, watching this in 2025 is wild that she did that because it's so weird and pathetic that she went to get a lie detector to prove to who this is so ridiculous. And then she didn't actually end up showing those results to anybody. And then that scene that she had with like John Blizzard or one of the Johns, and she's like, "So you and I don't know each other, right?" And yet he's at her house, and she's like, and she's basically having him try to explain how he involved her in this Lucy Apple Juicy thing with Teddi and Dorit and how she wasn't actually involved. So basically has him sit down for this scene at her house, says, "You and I have never met," prints out these text messages and says, like, explain it. So he does, yet he doesn't get fired. So if this guy was trying to create such chaos and create lies that Lisa said, that ended up appearing on screen, you'd think that this guy would be fired, especially since, like you said, you barely know him. So, no, Lisa, I still maintain, and I think Kyle is right in that one sense. I know we're not liking Kyle Richards this season, but in this one vein, I still very much believe Kyle for standing her ground and believing that Lisa did have an involvement with the Lucy Apple Juicy and Radar Online and all the stuff that went on. And I just think it's interesting that this many years later that Lisa is still doubling down and maintaining this and creating this air of like, how dare Kyle, who is proven to be a liar now, didn't believe me then, and if she had just been more like mature. It's just wild to listen to. But that's Lisa. She's always been very manipulative in terms of the public sense. I mean, other Vanderpump Rules, people have even said it. She'll say, I forget where this was from. It was maybe like an after show of Vanderpump Rules or something, where Kristen was like, "Lisa will convince you that you've killed her cat." And then you tell her, like, "Well, Lisa, you don't even have a cat, and I wasn't even around you this weekend, but somehow you end up like paying for the funeral for this cat and apologizing because that's what Lisa is able to do to you." So keep that in mind when you think about Lisa Vanderpump in future, for those of you who do want her to come back to the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Okay. Let's move on to Teen Mom. And we're going to start with Caitlin and Tyler because they had an episode of Kate and Ty Break It Down that was sort of cross-referenced with last week's episode of Teen Mom, the next chapter. So they had this TikToker on named Jordy Cray who has been pretty against them online in terms of their adoption story and them being so vocal on social media about their issues with Brandon and Teresa. So this episode was interesting because it was having the perspective of someone who doesn't typically agree with them. And what Caitlin and Tyler have been saying this whole time, especially in terms of them having this podcast in general, is that they wanted to tell the truth and create a space to tell the truth, and that they're fine with people voicing whatever they want to voice online as long as they have the truth behind them. So I think that's why Tyler sort of goes a little crazy on social media sometimes. It's because he feels like the truth is not being disseminated and it's misinformation that's being disseminated. So it was interesting to have the perspective of someone who doesn't agree with them on their podcast. But it was also a very awkward vibe because, I mean, this guy, this Jordy Cray, he has, sort of famously been against Caitlyn and Tyler and things that they were saying. So it was weird for them to sort of all be in a room together. And you could see him sort of maybe cowering back a little bit in terms of what he really wanted to say because he's in a room with them. So I just don't know how necessarily authentic his perspectives were, but we definitely got a lot out of this episode, and it was definitely really, really interesting. I want to mention that it was recorded in 2024. And then I just want to read this post that Tyler made before we get into the episode. He said, I'd like to address some things said in our podcast episode that drops tomorrow. I want people to remember that this was filmed in the beginning of our adoption being closed. Feelings at that time were still very raw and difficult to process, so I hope everyone takes that into consideration. Moving forward, as we previously discussed, we will continue to not talk negatively about our personal adoption story. We will only continue to speak about adoption, education, and adoptee advocacy. We are unfortunately not in control of what was previously recorded during those times. All we can control is how we choose to move forward. Thank you for your understanding. So Jordy Cray, this TikTok creator, basically his main perspective is that he feels like the venting online that Caitlyn and Tyler do, as we all know that they do. Basically, those of us who don't know, every time Caitlyn and Tyler get into an issue with Brandon and Teresa, they voice it online. And they voice everything online. They're very big about venting their frustrations on social media. So this Jordy Cray is saying this is harmful to Carly because it pisses off Brandon and Teresa and it brings so many people into the space, meaning that if you're putting it out on social media, that means everyone and their mother has an opinion. And then he also feels like Caitlyn and Tyler are trying to manipulate people to get sympathy. So Caitlyn and Tyler respond to that, and they feel that they want Carly to see this, and so that's why they don't want to stop. They also think it gives a voice for adoption and for adoptees, adopted kids. They said that they were actually reached out to by quite a many of adoptees saying, don't stop, never stop. All we ever wanted was to know that our birth parents tried and wanted to try to reach out to us. So that was information that like Jordy didn't have. Jordy said that he felt like Carly would see it all anyways on the show, though, so showing it on social media could actually drive her away anyways. And Caitlyn says that, she's blocked from sending gifts to the house now. And she basically tells this story of how this happened. So Caitlyn said that she reached out to Teresa about one of their annual visits, and Teresa wasn't really responding, which is typical of Teresa. So then she tried to follow up. And Teresa was like, no, sorry, I know it's disappointing, but we're actually not going to do a visit this year. But, we love you so much. And Caitlyn's like, well, yeah, it is disappointing, and this doesn't really feel like love to me. And so she feels like that because and Brandon are Southern, and they just don't really like people to look at them in a negative way, and they don't really like confrontation, that they didn't like that. And that's what led to Caitlyn and Tyler being blocked. And then Teresa and Brandon told their adoption counselor, Dawn, that they are no longer allowed to send gifts to the house, but not just that, don't tell anyone that we said that. So that's why Caitlyn and Tyler feel like, it's such an interesting double standard with them because they try to hold themselves in like this high regard where it's like they make these decisions, but don't want people to really know about it. And Caitlyn and Tyler feel very slighted because they feel like Teresa didn't really give them a response. Teresa just sort of said, because of the way you guys talk about us, we're just not going to have contact for a while. And then that's what ended up having, like, leading to the blocking and leading to them not being able to send gifts. So Caitlyn says that she doesn't really feel like she said anything that bad and that has nothing to do with Carly. So she continues to send gifts and she will continue to send updates because those are things that she has always done. So she feels like that's what she should continue to do. And it's also interesting that Brandon and Teresa said that them continuing to send gifts is disrespectful. Again, I think that's just like a weird Southern thing because why would it be disrespectful when it's your daughter? And I feel like they feel like it's disrespectful because it's going against the wishes of Brandon and Teresa. Um, Caitlyn and Tyler make mention of the fact that Brandon and Teresa agreed to an open adoption and they agreed to be filmed and they agreed to go to the reunion. So when people say that they didn't sign up for it, they did sign up for it. And Caitlyn also says that basically they will exploit Carly when it's beneficial for them. So Brandon and Teresa told Caitlyn and Tyler, you can only post pictures of the back of her head. And they were like, no problem. But then when MTV wanted to post pictures of the back of her head, they said, you can only do it if you pay us. So they were sort of feeling like, well, it sort of seems like you only allow things when there's a benefit to you. Also, apparently, Brandon and Teresa brought Carly on the cover of a magazine, like full face, when she was 5 years old. So again, it just feels like a double standard. But, Caitlyn and Tyler were kids and they were just doing what they were told. They were doing the best that they could, but they sort of felt like that they were getting this wishy-washy, run around sort of behavior from Brandon and Teresa, which was confusing for them. And they didn't want to like lose any access that they did have with Carly. So they went along with it the best that they could, but they only did post pictures that were approved, except for one time when, Tyler was like 17 years old and he said he wouldn't post the picture that he did again, and he didn't. So he followed the approved rules going forward, and then he ended up at like one of the last reunions or one of the few seasons ago. He posted a picture of the back of Carly's head, and it was sort of everyone in a row after like one of their last visits. And, it met the approved standard. It was just the back of her head. But Brandon and Teresa, or more so Brandon, was like, ugh, I hate that you posted that because now we can't get paid for it because, MTV doesn't have the rights for it. And it's just like, again, these are all the kinds of things that creators like Jordy Cray didn't know. All of us, the public, who have been watching them for literally 16 years at this point, we've been watching them since the beginning. We didn't have all this back information about Brandon and Teresa and them sort of going back and forth. We only saw what we saw. So, in that vein, giving us this additional information has sort of opened our eyes to the ways that Caitlyn and Tyler were sort of dicked around. Also, you have these two kids signing this adoption contract. They are kids. They have no one really to help them because their parents weren't supportive at the time. And, this I actually didn't know that adoptions aren't legal. I don't know, like Caitlyn and Tyler apparently have been told by people, get a lawyer, get a lawyer. And they were told, like, it doesn't work that way. It goes through an adoption agency and it's not a legally binding contract. So it doesn't work that way. But I don't know if that's true. So basically, Caitlyn and Tyler felt like their relationship with Brandon and Teresa was like a weird power dynamic that they didn't know how to navigate, which is very fair because they were two kids. They were two kids who were uneducated about this. They didn't have parents for support, like I said. So I can't even imagine the turmoil of being in that sort of power dynamic of a relationship for years and years and years, where you're basically at their beck and call. Caitlyn believes that this isn't something that Carly truly wants. She wants to know from Teresa if this is something that Carly wants. Because look, if Carly doesn't want to see Caitlyn and Tyler, they are fine with that. It would make them really upset and sad, but they would accept that and would understand. But they feel like they feel like Brandon and Teresa are doing this for their own reasons, with withholding Carly from them for their own reasons. And they don't think that this is something that Carly really wants. And that's why they feel like they have to keep putting this out on social media because they feel like Carly needs to see it. They feel like this is going to be Carly's first birthday without getting a gift from them. And they want to make sure she knows why. Now, I feel like Jordy's point is sort of like, well, they'll see that on the show, but I guess, the show really is just snippets of their lives. It isn't everything. And if there are things that Caitlyn and Tyler need to release on social media that they feel like the public isn't getting the full information on, especially stuff that we know now about Brandon and Teresa that we didn't know before, I think it's fair. But at the same time, I do totally agree that the way they vent on social media isn't healthy and it's not good and it's probably not beneficial to anyone. So I feel like there's got to be some sort of happy medium. But anyways, I'm just recapping what they've said. Tyler said that the end goal is that he just wants the truth to be out there and he wants Carly to be able to form her own opinion and for the public to be able to form their own opinions with the truth in mind, right? Oh, and lastly, in terms of his OnlyFans, just in case that was possibly the issue, he said that he has taken it down. Not because he is morally opposed to it, but just because it is possibly an issue itself. And again, as Brandon and Teresa being Southern, they just may be morally opposed to the OnlyFans issues. So, I just thought this was an interesting episode of Kate and Ty Break It Down. Like I said, it gave a lot more context for why they had the anger that they do. It does sort of seem like Brandon and Teresa would give them the runaround, would say, you can do these kinds of pictures, now you can't. You can do this, now you can't. You can see her, now you can't. And that is a power dynamic that is very difficult. even at the age that they're at now, which I think is only like 30, I can't imagine trying to navigate that sort of dynamic for many, many, many years, let alone the fact that they've been navigating it from the time that they've been 16. And one other thing I want to mention about it, because it seemed to be Tyler's biggest gripe, was the fact that apparently Brandon and Teresa wanted a closed adoption to begin with, and then changed their mind once they knew that Caitlyn and Tyler wanted an open adoption. So that really upset Tyler, and I didn't really see it at first, but his explanation makes sense. He feels like it makes them maybe deceitful or selfish, maybe in the sense that they just wanted a baby and they were willing to do whatever to just get a baby and didn't necessarily think about, they didn't hold true or strong to the things that they wanted, and instead were like, okay, fine, we're willing to give up, everything that we wanted because we just want a baby. And that just makes him question them, which I can understand. I mean, if you said that that's something that you wanted and that was something that was important to you, then why didn't you hold out for, a family where that was the condition? And Caitlyn's opinion in terms of why she thinks Brandon and Teresa are truly doing this is because she feels like that it's fear-based. And when she explained that a little bit more, I thought that made a lot of sense when she talked about how it really is every birth parent's biggest fear for their adopted child to leave them. They are afraid of their child meeting their birth parent because it could mean that they could build a stronger relationship. There's a jealousy there. I mean, you've built that relationship with that child, you've raised that child, but that person gave them life. And so there's that weird, awkward, confusing disconnect that can happen when you try to meet someone who gave you life, but you don't really know. And so that can be confusing for the parents who raised you. So she feels like there's probably a lot of fear in the fact that if Carly has a strong relationship with Caitlyn and Tyler, that it could change her relationship with Teresa or Brandon, or that, Carly may even want to leave them to live with Caitlyn and Tyler, right? I mean, that's an irrational fear, but it is a fear. I mean, I think that's very reasonable. And then Caitlyn also talked about infertility trauma. Now, I don't remember Teresa's specific issue, but if it was that she could not bear her own children, which I assume that it was, there is trauma that is associated with that, with constantly trying to get pregnant and not getting pregnant or losing children. And there could be this fear and this need to hold on to the ones that you have, almost like in a what do you call it? Like in an animalistic sort of way, because you fear losing them because you've lost so many before or you weren't able to get pregnant before. So, all of that in mind, I mean, no one's the bad guy here, but I don't think that Brandon and Teresa are necessarily the best people in the world. And it was really sad to hear Caitlyn and Tyler say that they wish they had picked different parents for their daughter. That's sort of how it ended. They said they wished they had picked different parents for Carly. And, even though that they've raised her in an amazing way and it's nothing like that, it just because of all of the communication issues that ended up coming out of this and where they are now to the point where they have absolutely no contact with their daughter Carly and haven't seen her in 2 years, it is really sad to know that this is where they are now. Okay, and then Farrah Abraham was on Angelina Pivarnik's podcast. So Farrah Abraham is from Teen Mom. Angelina Pivarnik is from Jersey Shore. And if you've been listening to Reality Roundup for the past few weeks, you will remember this story because it is just so bizarre. So Farrah Abraham has been a comedian for like, I don't know, a month now. Angelina Pivarnik's ex, Vinny 2.0, showed up there and he asked Angelina out and was starting to text with her, and then she was like shutting him down. Then apparently there was like some third woman involved that was like harassing him. So I don't know. It turned into this whole story. So I thought it was so funny that Angelina ended up having Farrah on her podcast, sort of to hash it all out. And what's interesting about it is if you were watching the trail of events, Farrah was never interested in Vinny. He was texting her. She was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested. I don't live in your state. Don't know who you are. No, thank you. So there's really no reason for Angelina and Farrah to have beef, technically. But you would think that Angelina, she is a pretty jealous person. So if this had gone differently, like if Farrah were interested, I don't think Farrah would be on Angelina's podcast, Hello. So I have never listened to Angelina's podcast, Hello, and it was really an interesting listen. You were listening to two women who just are very, how should I describe both of these women? They both have a lot of personality. They both have a lot of drive. And they both have a lot of anger within them, and you saw that in both of them. Farrah, I haven't actually seen speak or do anything in many years because one, I don't watch her comedy show, and two, she has been kicked off of Teen Mom. But it was just interesting to listen to her speak. And, she speaks in this way where she talks about women's empowerment, but from almost like a very uneducated way. Like, okay, so I'll get into it. So basically, she said that Angelina's ex came to her comedy show. She didn't know who he was. And then she was surprised that he went as well. And then so there's this other woman that apparently he was dating who has a child. And then I think that woman was reaching out to Farrah and stuff. And then Farrah released all of her text messages with Vinny 2.0. And she did that, she says, in order to like help this woman. And then Angelina said that she actually spoke to this woman on the phone and that Vinny 2.0 had like a very impactful part on her life. He had been to her daughter, or sorry, to her son's to her 2-year-old son's birthday like the week before. So she says that Angelina releasing these texts saved this woman and her child. I don't know if she meant their lives because, it's just a relationship. Like, yeah, does this Vinny 2.0 seem like a shitty guy? Sure. But, I don't really know if Farrah releasing these text messages to the world saved this woman's life. Also, Farrah said, she doesn't have any patience for someone who doesn't take accountability and gives off a rapey vibe. Now, that is a big word to use. She also apparently uses the word rape in her comedy show, which is a very, tentative word to use and not something you should just use so lightly. If you look at the text messages that Vinny 2.0 sent Farrah, which I did read a couple weeks back on the podcast, they were actually pretty respectful and nice. And listen, you guys know I'm a girl's girl and I hate most men, so I hate that I'm ever defending men, but it doesn't seem like he really spoke to her much at the comedy show. He just took a picture with her and then sent these texts after. If he's cheating on someone, okay, but to say he gives off rapey vibes and to say he doesn't take accountability, I mean, he did come out and say he asked her out, he shot his shot. I think both of these women, or everyone involved, made this entire situation much bigger than it was. I just think it's so funny for Farrah and Angelina to be sitting down about this. Farrah says that she went to a trauma center a few years ago, and that taught her that narcissism is rampant in our society. She said that her family was afraid to talk to her when she left there because they all knew that they were wrong. But like, they've always been afraid of her. They've always been afraid to talk to her. She said that, her dad's wife cried and apologized for all of her gaslighting. And she's like, I'm just so sick of the gaslighting of my dad's wife. And I was just like thinking about this for a second. I don't remember her dad's wife or if this is even the same person that was in her life before. But if you know Farrah Abraham, you know that she always has an issue with people. So it can't possibly be all of these people in her life are gaslighting her and doing her wrong. I mean, listen, her mother was a basket case, but I remember her going to dinner with her mother and her mother's boyfriend was a doctor, and he had just applied to be a doctor in the state where they lived. And Farrah started berating this man. She's like, get a job now. And he's like, well, it doesn't work like that. Like, I have to apply for a license and then once. And she goes, no, that's not how it works. I know how it works. You apply and then you get your license and then you work and then you get a job. You can't just be a freeloader. You can't do this. You can't just sit. And I was just like flabbergasted by this because, first of all, I am someone who used to license doctors for a living. So I can tell you that it is an application process that sits for months. So literally, you cannot go, it doesn't matter that you've gotten a job in a hospital. Without that license, you can't go ahead and do anything. You can't work at that job. And if we take our sweet ass time to give you that license, then it takes a sweet ass time for you to be able to start your job. And there is no impact that you can have. Like literally, Farrah saying, well, call them and do something and make it happen and make it happen. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. There are processes in place. But she's just this very aggressive individual that just feels that she acts in this way that's very entitled and like she knows everything about everything when she obviously can't know everything about everything. She's had, very little life experience. And I do believe that she's had many adults in her life that have fucked with her. I mean, the fact that she even had a kid at such a young age just shows that she probably didn't have like the proper upbringing. But, and her mom was definitely abusive to her, but that doesn't excuse the fact and the way that she speaks to people, which is so wildly aggressive and so insane, but now she's sort of masking it as feminism, is what I've started to notice. Just saying that all men are narcissistic, all men are rapey, having jokes about, like, oh, you're probably my next rapist in her comedy special. Like, it's not what feminism is. And I think, sure, create your own brand if you want, but Angelina has always just kind of irked me. But she also said that she has a PhD in parenting, which I thought was interesting because her daughter is 16, which obviously makes her, a perfect parent. And she said that she even makes Zoom dates sign NDAs now. Now, we talked about this last week with Kaylin Lowry. I think it's one thing to have someone who's like in your life as like a boyfriend, if you've been burned a lot, sign something because you feel really, really nervous. It's another to ask someone you're going on a Zoom date with over a computer to sign an NDA. But again, I expect no differently from Farrah Abraham. Okay, and then in just a little bit more of Teen Mom news, Mackenzie is pregnant with twins. So we saw her last week on the next chapter. She was doing her IVF treatment with her boyfriend Casano. And, she has such a sad backstory too. Her ex-husband, Josh McKee, they have 3 kids together, but that man, I don't know what it is about him. There's like a darkness to him, or like there's nothing behind his eyes, actually. That man was not present in their relationship, was not present in parenting, and now at this point, apparently, is not even answering the children's texts, which is actually just disgusting. So I'm really glad that they have Cassano in their lives because even Mackenzie, to be quite honest with you, is a little bit of a hot mess express in terms of organization and a little bit of her parenting skills. So it's nice that she has this partner. And they've gone through this IVF journey because she was worried about getting pregnant naturally with her diabetes. So I'm happy for her. It was announced officially on the Drew Barrymore show, which she went on with Brianna DeJesus. And good for her. I mean, congrats. I hope this is everything that she's wanted and that she has a full-time 50% parent with her because she's just really never had that with Josh in the past. She's really, really always been a single mom. And then we also just got word from Corey Wharton that Teen Mom might be on pause. So he said that he's heard from producers, that it's on pause right now, and we just don't know if it's completely gone from TV. That's sort of all we know. I mean, I don't really know when they filmed to begin with. It sort of seems like they're always filming. It feels like as soon as reunions are happening, you already see Instagram posts of cameras up in the house. Or to me, and because the seasons are always like in the middle of the year, it's hard to tell when they're actually happening. So I just thought they were always filming all year round. I mean, we are at the point where these people are 30 years old, so it has to end at some point. I hope there isn't some other weird reason for why it's on pause, and I hope they do end up resuming filming. I don't love the Teen Mom, what do they call it? The family vacation one where they get like therapy. I don't really like that, but Teen Mom, the next chapter, where we're just continuing on learning about their lives. I still really enjoy that, and I would literally watch that till they're like 50 because it's sort of like with Vanderpump Rules, where it outgrew the show, and I don't think this outgrew the show. Well, I guess this has outgrown the show. It's no longer Teen Mom, but none of these people are teens. But we are still so interested in these characters and these people and their lives because we've been watching them for such a long time. So that's why I still feel invested, and I hope that it is just a short pause and that it's not really going anywhere. Okay, let's get into our last topic, which is The Bachelor. And one funny thing I want to say about The Bachelor is that I actually haven't watched it in years, but I am such a Bachelor historian. Like, I used to watch every season. I've watched even like Bachelor Pad, Bachelor in Paradise. Like, I know all of the stuff from the very, very beginning. I know all of its lore. So, because of that, I feel like I have a very interesting take on things that are happening now. Not so much in the sense that I'm talking about seasons or people that I haven't really watched on TV, but some of our favorite bachelors and bachelorettes are still in the media and are still telling stories. And because I remember them from that time and I've been watching their journeys from the jump, I just feel like I have an interesting perspective. So we are going to start with Caitlin Bristow. She just had an episode of her podcast Off the Vine, and she had her friend Kat Campbell do the podcast episode for her and basically treat her like she is being interviewed by Kat Campbell, and Kat Campbell is going to ask her questions. And it kind of gave an interesting vibe. Now, I want to start this by saying I have always really liked Caitlin Bristow. I have always thought she's been a great representation of feminism and ambition and drive. People have always really disliked her, and I'll give my perspective on that before I'll get into hers. You know, at the time that she came into The Bachelorette, she definitely was a little bit more outspoken and not necessarily girl next door in terms of look or vibe. That being said, I think she was so funny. She was probably one of the funniest bachelorettes we've ever had. I just really enjoyed watching her on TV. Now, where I think she made a misstep in terms of public perception, now I don't think she made a misstep. This was the public perception's misstep, or where she made a misstep with the public, was that she ends up bringing Nick Viall onto her season of the show late into the season. So Nick Viall at this point, he's not one of the guys on her season. They just know each other from talking in advance on like Twitter, Instagram, or whatever, which is so taboo. And she ends up, being like, hey, I'm going to bring him on the season and let him be one of the guys. So the guys are livid, and it ends up coming down to Sean and Nick Viall, anyways. But somewhere along the way, before Fantasy Suites, Caitlyn and Nick have sex. And because of that, people lost their fucking minds. They called her a slut and a whore and all of this stuff. Now, keep in mind, if they had sex during Fantasy Suites, which would have been like, I don't know, a week or two later, because this entire process is only 8 weeks anyways, it would have been fine. It would have been totally acceptable for her to sleep up with up to four men, right? Because you bring four men to Fantasy Suites, or you can bring up to four men to Fantasy Suites. So instead, she slept with Nick earlier than Fantasy Suites, and people just could not accept that. They could not accept the breaking of the rule didn't equate to misogyny. Like they just weren't able to do it. People were like, if you've broken this rule, then you're a whore. When again, like I said, they would have had sex like 2 weeks later in Fantasy Suite. So it's wild. And then this is just maintained for the duration of her time in the media. She has been the first bachelorette to get to 1 million followers on Instagram. She was one of the first people in the podcasting space from The Bachelor and to do well from it. So she's definitely a pioneer in many senses, but people, especially women, have continued to hate on her. Um, she has done so many amazing things. I mean, I think she even was in a musical. She is an amazing dancer. She can be an actress in some of the things that I've seen. She has a lot of businesses going on. So I just think it's interesting that she gets so much hate. And so it sort of seemed like that's what the vibe of this episode was going to be about, because it seemed like her friend Kat was like, I just love you and you're just so amazing and I just don't understand why everyone doesn't love you. You're the best friend I've ever had. And it just was like, okay, where is this coming from? And so just because it started with that vibe, it just gave this very inorganic feel to it where it felt like, okay, we are trying to do something with this episode. And again, this is coming from somebody who really, really likes Caitlin Bristow. I was feeling objectively like this is coming from a weird place. Then Caitlin started to talk about why she feels like people don't like her. She said that it could be jealousy. Now, I hate when people say that because I am like a real person from a real place, and it's just not something in my real world where jealousy really happens or people experience that. So when people say that as a reason for not liking someone, it makes me eye roll a little bit because it just feels so trivial that someone would not like you because they might be jealous of you. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's not a real thing. Jealousy is a very real thing. I just don't like when people use that as an excuse for why someone might not like you. Um, she also said that, like I said, how she was sort of different. She came in with tattoos and she talked about sex and she swore. And The Bachelorette is usually supposed to be like a girl next door type, which Caitlyn wasn't. So that definitely had something to do with it. And then she gets into her relationship with Jason Tarek. So as you'll recall, Caitlyn was initially on, oh my God, I'm sitting here like trying to go back and then can't remember anybody's names. She was initially on Chris Soule's season. Then her and what was the name of the other girl? Brit. I think her name was Brit. They got to be bachelorettes together for like a day, and then the guys chose between them, which, looking back, is completely insane and misogynistic. We've never done that for The Bachelor. The men pick Caitlyn. Caitlyn picks Sean. She and Sean get engaged. They end up being together for a few years. They break up. Then she has Jason Tarek on her podcast, either right after the breakup or it was when she was still with. No, she had met up with Jason when she was still with Sean. And Sean was there. Like they all had dinner together or they did a podcast together. And then right after her and Sean broke up, she had Jason on her podcast. And it was sort of not love at first sight, but it happened right from there. And he said that he knew she wasn't in like the best place, obviously, but he pursued her anyways. And, he ended up moving to Nashville. They got engaged. And then, I don't know, 2 years ago, I think now, they separated. And so it's interesting that she's bringing this up now. I mean, he's had other relationships since, she's had speculations of other relationships since, and there have been, things in the news that have come up about their relationship over time. But it's interesting that she is choosing now, this time, and again, I feel like it's 2 years later, to really just air all of her dirty laundry about this. And it feels like it came from somewhere, and I'm just not sure where it came from because, again, I don't remember anything in the news that recently about either of them or their relationship. So it feels like this is a response to something, but I'm just not sure what. So I guess I'll preface it with that. But she said that in a relationship, she is the type of person to hold on to resentment. Actually, not just relationships. She said that, even in friendships. So instead of dealing with small things, she'll let it build up and build up and build up, and it turns into huge resentment. And, that is such an unhealthy thing to do. And I always try my best to be what I call confrontational with people. I'll be like, hey, is something bothering you about me? And if it is, please tell me. Please, please, please tell me. I really want you to tell me. I tell that to almost every new friend. I think it's really important. But in those times when I don't do it, and I mentioned this maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, I had a friend where I didn't confront them about something that was bothering me because it was about her personality and I didn't feel like I could. It ended up building up and building up to the point where I almost punched her in the face because, I just was so annoyed by like her existence at that point. And that's why I think it's so important. If the friendship or relationship is something that's important to you and you want to try to fix, tell them what it is. Tell them what it is because holding that in is only just going to cause you to explode, and you're never going to be able to repair with that person once you've gotten to a certain point. I swear to God. Then Caitlyn talks about being competitive in her relationship with Jason Tarek. So she said that when it comes to the podcast, and she did mention this some months back on another podcast or on her own, that she asked him not to start a podcast. She said it was really important to her. It was like it was her thing. It's what she really wanted to do. When he moved into her house in Nashville, it was like a promise that he had made to her. And then he went back on it. And I remember it wasn't in this podcast episode, but she said it in, a previous episode or another podcast that once he said he was starting a podcast, she like went outside and threw up. It was that big a deal to her. So for that reason, it sort of led to this competitive nature. And even within that, it led to what she thought was going to happen, where he was stealing like email lists and like client lists and taking guests and things like that. She also said that she felt like she would have to ask him for rent at the first of the month, like she'd have to like prompt him for that. So she sort of felt like he was riding her coattails, and she felt like it was because he didn't know who he was without her. That I don't really know because I don't really know him. But she says that she admits that she was trying to hold him back from podcasting because she knew that it would cross wires because, like I said, it was her favorite thing to do. And, he did it anyway. So for him, it was just about growing financially, but she was made to feel crazy because she was trying to act like his growth, or she was part of stunting that growth, I guess. Now, I can understand this because if something is really important to you and you feel like it's your thing and you're passionate about it, I can understand how you would feel jealous or competitive if your partner takes on the same thing, especially if you've asked them not to. But I want to remind everyone of something as well. And again, I like Caitlin Bristow, so I feel like this is coming from a weird perspective, but I do like Caitlin Bristow, and I always have really, really championed her. I just want to mention that Jason ended up losing his job in like finance because of Caitlyn. Because early in their relationship, she said on her podcast or another podcast that they dry humped the first time they did anything sexual. And because of that, he lost his job. And his whole family was really upset. He was really upset. And then he got into podcasting. So you also have to remember that he didn't have a job at the time. That doesn't mean he couldn't have gotten into something else. I totally agree in that respect, especially if it was something so important to her that he didn't do it. But I just want to point out he didn't have a job at that time. Um, she said that she feels like he really lost the plot in the relationship and the resentment really started, especially when he started taking like her email lists and stuff. And she said that she thinks it has a lot to do with jealousy, which, like I said, I hate when people say. She also said that she never said he couldn't see the dogs. So they had two dogs together, Pino, and I forget the name of the other dog. And I know that they were like sending them back and forth to each other's houses. And she said that that's not what happened. She didn't say that he couldn't see the dogs. She said that she didn't want to co-parent the dogs anymore because they were rescues. And she even got advice from like lots of people saying that it wasn't the best thing for the dogs to be going from home to home. It just wasn't what's best for them. But she's like, he's never come to see them. Yet he went on a podcast saying that he's not allowed to see the dogs. And then his co-host was like, oh, was this at the time that your new relationship started? And he was like, yeah. And Caitlin clarifies, well, no, actually, they had been having these conversations back and forth for 2 months. And he had actually been dating her that whole time, just not publicly. And this is like Kat Stickler, I think, who he's no longer with. But she's just trying to clarify, no, this wasn't necessarily at the time that he started dating someone. He had actually been dating her for longer than the public knows, and we had been talking about this issue with the dogs for longer than the public knows. But she's like, he hasn't even come to visit them. So there's that. She thinks it's fucked up that he named his new dog. So I don't know if you guys see that he got a new dog. Her child's name, which is Teddi. So she wanted to name her child Teddi, and Jason Tarek has named his dog Teddi. Now, I feel like isn't this more of a dog name than a person name anyways? Like Teddy is very much of a dog name. I just think it's a very interesting, I mean, it's something that we do, right, as humans, not as dogs, where you don't use somebody else's baby name. It's like a thing. I've never seen a man do it before, and I've never seen someone do it for a dog before. Do I think he did it out of spite? I mean, if he knew the name, what she says that he did, and that she actually has a text showing that she's sent that to him and said, like, this is the name I want for my baby, then yeah, I think he did do it out of spite. But it just sort of felt like a trivial argument to be like, he took my baby named Teddy for his dog. It just felt like, ugh, this feels a little bit stupid. Um, so that was basically what we got out of this, and she was sort of saying like, I know this is going to end up becoming headlines and big news, but she just felt like she needed to clarify all of this because she felt like there's so many misconceptions, one about her and two about their relationship. I mean, I never had a lot of misconceptions about their relationship. I do recall her saying at the time that they broke up that there is just like a lot of misogyny that comes with these kinds of breakups where everybody's like, how can you do this to him? How can you put a man through this? When at the end of the day, they weren't in the best space anymore. And while she was the one who broke up with him, the relationship wasn't working. And one thing that I do want to mention about their relationship that again, she didn't say in this episode, she said it way back in the episode where she announced the breakup. She said we weren't prioritizing our relationships anymore. Or sorry, we weren't prioritizing our relationship anymore. We were prioritizing work and we were not prioritizing each other. And that's just something funny to think about given the current discourse about Craig and Paige and how she was going on tour and how she felt like he wasn't supportive because he wanted to be a priority while she was going on tour and he just wanted to make sure that they were prioritizing their relationship while she was away at work, which we thought was like, oh my God, how dare he? But then if you look at this scenario, Caitlin's like, listen, this was a problem in our relationship. We were off doing our own things. We weren't connecting. And so because we weren't taking that time to prioritize our relationship and make sure that it always had a place amongst everything else in our lives, amongst work, amongst day to day, our relationship fell by the wayside and therefore our relationship ended up disintegrating. So that being said, I think it's just something interesting to keep in mind that it's maybe not always a bad thing for a couple to talk about prioritizing each other in their relationships. Okay. Okay, let's move on to Rachel Lindsay, who I've actually been talking about for the past couple of weeks. And last week we were talking about her choice in terms of who she chose on The Bachelorette. You'll recall that Rachel Lindsay was the first Black Bachelorette. She was originally on Nick Viall's season and then became The Bachelorette. She chose Brian Abasolo and they got divorced like a year ago. And last week, when we were talking about it, we were talking about it from the perspective of why she chose Brian over Peter. And she came out on her podcast recently talking about those pressures that women have to get married and to have kids, especially when you've put your career first. So we didn't really dive into the divorce from Brian Abasolo last week, but she did talk about that a bit more. And there's something that she said that I want to play for you that I so believe and resonate with so hard. And I know some people might come at me for this and not agree, but I'm sorry. I just really agree with this. So Rachel and Brian get divorced, okay? Rachel was a lawyer, now does like entertainment hosting, influencer, whatever. Brian was a chiropractor. And they moved a few times during the duration of their relationship slash marriage. And when their marriage ended, they didn't have a prenup, which, ugh, so stupid on her part, given that she's a lawyer, but, big mistake. And as part of their divorce, he asked for alimony. And I just thought that was so insane, given the fact that he is a fully capable man of working. He is a doctor of chiropractic. And I know that there was some sort of argument. I wasn't keeping up with the case, but I remember he had some sort of argument at the time, like because of all their moves to like follow her around to be an influencer, he wasn't able to keep a stable client base, so he wasn't able to, build a practice as a chiropractor and continue to work. I just think that to have money from your spouse is one thing when, you are a mother and you're not working and to support you in that sense. But, if you're an educated person, fully capable of working, and there's no reason why you can't be currently working now, it gives me the ick. And I hate to put anything in gender roles, but I sort of just feel like this is so unbecoming of a man to ask his lawyer, professional, amazing ex-wife who has worked so fucking hard for any money. And if you'll recall at the time, she was having to send him like money transfers when this was all said and done, and she titled like the money transfer temp leech money, which is just so funny because he is a fucking leech. So I'm gonna play this clip from her podcast, which again is going to say the same sentiments. I don't even feel like I can even expand anymore because she does it in such an articulate way, and it says everything that I just said plus more.
One of the things that I want to say about my situation is I'm truly tired of the narrative of, well, he's deserving of the money because he picked up and sacrificed his career for her. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this once. Not true. My ex did not move 3 times for me. We moved to Dallas because he quit his job as soon as he won the show, and I did not. So that was the only option because I was still employed. Nobody takes it. That's one move. Nobody takes into consideration that I left my legal job in Dallas and moved to Miami with no job. Nobody considers that. Then we moved to LA, and that was a we decision. I think if you follow the journey, you knew that I wasn't the only one who wanted to be in Hollywood. And that's all I'm going to say about that. The reason I said that my ex is not deserving of alimony is because we both made sacrifices in the marriage, and I shouldn't be punished because I was successful during the time that we were married and he wasn't. You guys can fault me for not getting a prenup. I get it. I understand it. You don't know the circumstances that went into all of that. Like I said, I'm not going to go into the different tab. But somebody who is fully capable of working, who is licensed in multiple states, who could go work for somebody or start their own business or could influence or could use the platform that was given to them to leverage it into other things, should not be receiving spousal support. I'm not saying that my ex didn't deserve some sort of compensation. If you followed along, you saw that I was willing to give money. What I don't agree with is the taking advantage of just because you can take advantage of an old system.
And that's what I completely agree with because is he legally entitled to the money under the law? Yes. But to take advantage of it and to take the money is what is just giving me the ick. Like he could just go be an influencer. Why doesn't he just make money as an influencer? Instead, he's taking her money. So yes, it is temp leech money. Brian Abasolo, you gross man. Okay, our last story today, and this ended up being longer than I thought. We are going to talk about 90 Day Fiancé. So, as some of you who watch the show may know, there is a pretty prominent couple on the show, Jasmine and Gino. They have been on many different iterations of the show before the 90 Day, and most recently they've been on 90 Day The Last Resort, which is basically like a White Lotus style show where they have like a bunch of the couples come on who are not doing well in their relationship, and they have therapists there who are there to sort of help them through it. I watched it, or what I thought was it. I watched like 8 episodes and I thought it was over, but it wasn't. So when I saw a bunch of news had come out about Jasmine and Gino in the past week, I was confused, and it turns out it's apparently I had missed like 5 episodes. So I went back and watched them, and I'm all caught up. But Basically, the down low on Gino and Jasmine's relationship is that Gino is from Michigan. He's Italian. He's a never nude in terms of his head, meaning that he always wears a hat. He doesn't like his bald head or the shape of his head or something. So no matter what, this man is always wearing a hat. So yeah, it just reminds me of like a never nude. And Jasmine is from Panama. She has two children, and I don't know where they are. I believe one of them is with their father, one of them, I believe, is with Jasmine's parents. And she has been with Gino for, God, it feels like years and years and years, but I think it's been only like 3 or 4 years. He brought her to America. He was supposed to also bring one of her kids, but didn't fill out the paperwork. Whoopsie. And they have always had a ton of strife in their relationship, super, super contentious because, oh God, I don't know, cheating, things like that. There was one point where Gino showed a naked picture of Jasmine to his ex-girlfriend, and then that girl ended up like sharing it with like the internet, and Jasmine ended up losing her job as a teacher because of it. So these two have been through some shit, okay? And Gino is a piece of garbage. Now, their relationship has gotten to a point where it is so contentious that they can never stop fighting. I have never seen an episode where they are not fighting and they are not going through it. Now, is it sometimes Gino's fault? 100%. Is it sometimes Jasmine's fault? 100%. They're both ridiculous. They're both awful. That being said, I just don't know why they're still together. And because their relationship has gotten so contentious, they haven't had sex in 9 months. And Gino's explanation for that has always been, I can't have sex with somebody that I'm fighting with. Like, I just can't. I've tried and I can't because the other men on the show, like the other men in the couples, will try to, just like do it, Gino, just do it. I don't understand. Just get it over with. Just have sex with your wife. And he's like, I can't. I can't. Oh, and by the way, the why I call it a White Lotus style, sorry, why I call it a White Lotus style show is because the opening credits has literally like White Lotus music. It looks like the resort. They're trying to create that sort of ambiance with this show, which is, it just makes me laugh on the back end because it is two very different things. And so Gino and Jasmine are at this resort. They're talking about how they haven't had sex. And it finally comes out that Gino says to one of the guys, it's not just that I'm gonna wait until we haven't fought. It's that I don't ever want to have sex with her. Even if we're not fighting, I don't ever want to have sex with her. And one of the girls told Jasmine, and she didn't really have a reaction, which I thought was odd. I thought she would have a huge reaction. And then she decides, okay, well, because of that, I still love Gino, doesn't really change anything, want to stay married. We're going to have an open marriage, and I'm going to have to talk to Gino about that. What I still don't understand is why these two want to be married, because if Gino has now said, I never want to have sex with Jasmine again, and Jasmine now knows this, I don't understand why they're still married. I don't understand why she feels that she loves him, if that's her reason, but okay. But how can he love her? How can he love her if he doesn't want to have sex with her ever again? His words. So they get to this point where they're discussing an open relationship. The whole thing feels like a fever dream. I'm like, is this real? Gino agrees to it. It ends up being this guy, Matt, who Jasmine works out with at the gym. And then they have the first part of the tell-all of 90 Day Fiance, The Last Resort on March 31st, so last Sunday. And Jasmine comes out pregnant as hell. And Gino's face, he just looks like a curmudgeon. He is so upset. He says, like, we separated, blah, 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 and she's with Matt now. And the whole thing took a turn almost immediately. You could barely anyone got any words out. Rob from Rob and Sophie, who are also on this show, started like basically trying to attack Jasmine. It got super heated and super contentious right away. So I'm just gonna read you guys the Instagram post that came after that episode came out because, like I said, we got so little from Jasmine in the episode in terms of what's going on in her life and how we got here because Rob lost his freaking mind trying to defend Gino, which is wild. So this is what Jasmine said on Instagram. She said, this is the last time I would ever be addressing Gino ever. He was already with someone. I was not aware of it. Her name is Natalie. She's from Vegas. By the time we came back from couples therapy, then he broke up with her. Then he dated two Brazilian ladies, broke up with them, then started dating Kelly. So far, I believe they broke up because he body shamed her online and cheated on her. Those are at least the ones I'm aware of. I'm not the one filming Single Life, as people are stating. The heartbroken hurt husband is just an act. He has never given two shits about me ever. The only reason why he didn't want slash need me in his life any longer was because I got my green card and he wouldn't get paid twice as much as usual. Only his part. He accepting the open marriage was just a strategy to blame me, as usual, and play his usual role as the innocent, nerdy guy who was already taken advantage of. A 56-year-old man who has done it to multiple women in the past. Justice will be served. And then she also said, all I'm up to is to bring my children to America, to have my baby, and to continue to work hard to support my family. Matt is just a support system given the circumstances and a good friend. I don't have the mental energy for anything else, and it will take me 3 lifetimes to ever trust men again. So I thought Matt was her boyfriend and like partner. I am so confused still at this point. And obviously, I will update you because there'll be more on part two. And if you know anything about 90 Day Fiancé, there will be like 80 parts. That's how they do this. There's like more parts to their reunions than there is actual episodes of the show. So Jasmine is basically saying that Gino has continued to have girlfriends. He doesn't care about her. And I guess this whole reasoning is that if he's with her, he gets paid for her and him. And then when she gets a green card, he doesn't get paid her part anymore. So now he doesn't want her. I mean, some of that makes sense because, again, I'm sitting here going, why do either of these people want to be together? Because at this point, it is just so insanely contentious. And then Gino responded to her stories and he said, my response to the additional lies posted in Jasmine's story. He said, Jasmine is back to lying once again and trying to make me look bad, trying to cover up her huge betrayal everyone witnessed during the last resort show. Typical Jasmine style. This will all come out over time, promise. I never was speaking with any women of any kind of relationship with women while Jasmine and I were together, as she claims. 100% facts. I was always fully committed to Jasmine while we were together. I've only spoken to or pursued women after our separation. Please show the proof of all these lies, Jasmine. I will provide all the evidence and receipts once my NDA expires and look forward to it. Please stop the chronic lying, Jasmine, to try and save yourself from what you have done to me. You know the truth as well as God. God. Okay. Again, both of these people are awful, but in this fight, I am always going to be Team Jasmine. She's pregnant. Gino treated her like crap. He really wanted to mold her into his life. He wouldn't even drive her to the gym because it felt like it was out of his way. He wouldn't do anything for her. And so she was just so miserable. Watching her misery was just beyond. But again, leave him then. Just leave him. So Rob also made a statement on Instagram, which I'll read in terms of his reaction on Last Resort and the public reaction that it got. So he said, man or woman, the only slap I'd ever accept is to try to avoid or defend would be from my mom or my woman. I'd take that slap and it wouldn't faze me one bit. I've been slapped by an ex while talking and it didn't even stop talking. She hated that I had zero reaction. But what I'll never do is sit back and let anyone else come at me aggressively with intent to harm me and not at least brace myself, especially if I'm sitting down. I'm going to stand up to prepare for the conflict, especially if she's wielding a 6-inch heel over me, looking like she wanted to kill me. And just to point out, yeah, it did sort of get into a crazy physical altercation. To be honest, I wasn't really watching it with enough, like I wasn't fully paying attention. I was like looking at my phone and stuff. I wasn't sure who was doing what to who. But yeah, Rob was up and Jasmine was up, and it got like super physical looking. He continued that people were reaching out, mad that I stood up to a pregnant woman, like I would hit her, but I would never hit her. But avoiding assault is my right as a human being. So stop trying to normalize infidelity and assault. There's been a lot of name calling coming to certain people, but when I finally respond, it's okay to hit me. What's wrong with y'all? Some of this audience prefers fake people. Tell them I'm not that kind of man that plays fake. And if you're faking in my face, I'm going to call it out. Shouldn't have ever brought that shit around me. Rant over. So yeah, he doesn't speak well. So that's basically all from that. But like I said, part two of the reunion is going to air. I'll update you on this saga of Gino and Jasmine. And it's one of these sagas where it's interesting to talk about, like it is with Teen Mom, because they almost seem like such a historic part of 90 Day Fiancé because they have been on it for such a long time. So I feel like their story sort of deserves to continue to be told throughout the rest of history, which I will continue to do as long as they continue to talk shit about each other online, right? All right, well, thank you so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you BBs on Saturday for mini recaps. Love you. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Bravo Investigator podcast in partnership with Hurrdat Media. You can watch full-length videos on Hurrdat Entertainment's YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Bravo Investigator. If you enjoy the show, please leave me a 5-star review. Love you, BBs. See you next time.
A Hurrdat Media Production.